Welcome back, my friends, to episode 166. We are back from our spring break and we are excited to release our next episode. Episode 166 sees Robyn Hawkins join us in studio to talk about a pretty fascinating process called the inquiry method. Now, this is a process of questioning your stressful thoughts and who you become when you believe those thoughts. You see, when you believe something, you tend to go down a different path than where you're currently at. And it becomes a departure from who you ultimately want to be. And so through the inquiry process, you are bringing to light the thoughts that are keeping you from moving forward towards your ultimate destiny and ultimate direction. Part of this process is by looking at those thoughts and questioning whether or not they serve you. But furthermore, this process digs deeper into figuring out where did these thoughts come from? What is some of your earliest memories of these thoughts? And oftentimes they go back to a childhood memory where we picked up a thought, a belief from ourselves or from someone else that we then carried with us, created programming, and then just consistently executed based on that programming. Now, this has been a fascinating episode to create because when Robyn and I first got connected and started talking about the episode and we brainstormed what could this look like, she said, "Hey, why don't you go through the process so that you can speak to it when we record the episode?" And I've got to tell you, after the first session that we went through, I was hooked. From then to now, I've been through, I believe, 5 or 6 different inquiry sessions with Robyn, and I can't tell you the impact that it's made on my life. In fact, it is one of the most impactful coaching things that I have ever done. Now, I've been to counseling, I've been to uh, therapists, I have friends who are psychotherapists. Like I talk to people on a regular basis, and this is the thing recently that has made the biggest change in my overall life. Robyn and I have sat and I have dug through many former beliefs that I didn't even know were running in the background. And what the inquiry process has taught me is that it doesn't matter whether, like me, you're coming up on your 48th birthday or whether you're 28 or 68. You can dig deeper to learn more about why you do what you do. And in doing so, you have the ability to make a significant change in life. The process, while difficult at times and emotionally taxing, is one of the most freeing processes that I've ever been through. And through inquiring more about what's happening inside of my brain, why those beliefs are there, and where they eventually came from, there have been moments where I've literally laughed out loud at myself for how stupid some of these thoughts are. Now I've smiled and looked back at my young self and said, well, you picked it up and you did that with the best of intention because you didn't know any better. But that programming got installed, and at 47, 48 years old, it's still running until it's not. So, in this episode, expect to learn what the inquiry process is, how you can start to ask questions to dig a little bit deeper rather than assuming that you understand exactly how the world works and how you work. You can dig in and ask the questions that will help you to identify what are the limiting beliefs that you currently carry with you. All that and more on today's Evolved Man. Welcome to the Evolved Man, where we are at war with the mediocrity of modern man. The Evolved Man is for men like you who are willing to be strong, open, and aggressive learners. Men who are not afraid to disrupt and change. It's time we ditch the current conventional idea that we devolve with age, that the dad bod is our destiny, and that the glory days are behind us. Your best isn't behind you, and I'm here to provide you with practical tools, a few tips and tricks, and everyday wisdom to help you evolve into your highest form. Strong, lean, smart, educated, and emotionally intelligent. Now, let's go to war. Well, Robyn, thanks for coming in studio.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you.
That's yeah, awesome to be here.
Yeah, really excited. But I've got to be honest, I'm not sure how to take this. If I'm understanding it correctly, you named your dog after me. Is that right?
Yes.
I so I mean, I know that there's probably some sort of insinuation here, and you can just say it, Steve, you look like a dog, but come on, really? We just met.
You both have the curly hair.
I guess that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Endearing personalities.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. I had a friend of mine that when I got into radio, he was the guy that helped me get into radio. He says, Steve, you certainly have the face for radio. So I said, thank you, Larry. Yeah, I've got a question for you. What is a goog?
A goog. Um, if I love you, I have about 10 nicknames for you at
Okay.
least.
Okay.
So that is I don't know. It just came for my son when he was young. I called him Goog, Google Pie, Googs.
I love that. That's
He had like
adorable.
100 nicknames, so that's
Does he?
just one of them. That's one that stuck. Yes.
I'm the same way with my kids. So when I saw you posted that, I thought, I don't even know what a goog is, but I now I know because like you, I have way too many nicknames.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is now that my kids are older, because my oldest is 24 and then I've got 20 and 18. um, they have so many nicknames and now there's new ones that are coming up. In fact, my
Mm.
oldest, who's getting married in August, she has a new nickname called Beef. I did not give this to her, but it came up in a conversation with her and her fiance, and they were at work together, and from now on she is now known as Beef. I said, Beth, how do you feel about that? She's like, oh, I think it's funny. I don't know
Yeah,
that
I don't know
I've,
how I would feel about that
I'm
one.
not sure either. Yeah. I love that nickname.
Yeah.
So when I have guests in the studio, I place a book next to them because of a couple of reasons. It either reminds me of the person or there's something about that book that relates to what we're talking about. So actually,
Yes.
I went off script a bit and I put two books out there. So the first one is what?
Loving What Is by Byron Katie.
And this is a book that you introduced me to,
Mhm.
and I fell in love with it. I actually listened to it. I know we were talking about this before the recording, because she does such a great job of facilitating, and you hear her voice, and she's just so kind of this, oh, hi, sweetie, and
Yeah.
angel, and calling people all these beautiful names. How did you get introduced to this book?
I was introduced to this book a long time ago, I think from a friend. I had started on my spiritual seeking journey. So I listened to this many, many years ago, um, and found it to be profound then. But more recently, I've been doing a version of this work on my own. And then more recently, I decided to do a school to become a facilitator of it.
Mhm.
So, what I do is an extended version of what you'll find in this book, but it um, was created based on the questions in this book. So, the woman that trained me trained directly under Byron Katie for many years.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty fascinating
yeah,
book. And the reason why I bought that, and that's yours to take home. I know you already have the book, but I figured I'm going to buy it for you anyway
thank
because
you.
I'm sure that you have plenty of people that you could give this to
Mhm.
as a gift. Now, I went off script a little bit and I did a second book. Have you seen the second book? Have you heard of that book before?
I've never heard of this book. I recently started following him on Instagram.
Oh, did you really? I didn't even know
Hmm.
he was on Instagram. I follow him on Twitter or X, I guess.
Well, I think I think so.
Oh, well,
But
maybe
no, I
Eric
haven't heard of this
Jorgensen.
book. So maybe you tell me about it.
All right. So Naval, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. This has actually become one of my top, probably five books of all time
Wow.
because Naval's wisdom is so simple. The way that he puts things out, and he does these little tweet storms where you'll get like 10 or 12 tweets in a row, and he just is stacking this wisdom on top of each other. Now, Naval didn't write the book. Eric Jorgensen wrote the book about Naval, and it's essentially a compilation of Naval's tweets, of his quotes from his speeches. But one of the things that I found really fascinating about Naval is that he takes things that I think we all observe, but we're a little bit too blind to,
Hmm.
and he just brings them out in a way where you're like, oh, yeah,
Oh,
wow, okay, I
yeah.
get it.
Uh-huh.
And I got you that book. One, because I think you'll love reading it. But two, I had the opportunity to sit down with you recently and go through your inquiry method and be coached by you. There were a few times where you asked me some questions, and all of a sudden I just had this light bulb moment, similar to when I read Naval's book. And I looked at you and I just, oh, yeah, it's really that simple, isn't it?
It is that simple.
But we
We
miss
make
it.
it so difficult and it's so clouded and
Yeah.
yeah,
Why?
it is pretty simple.
It's so simple. So anyway, I got you that book because I think you're going to love it, but it also reminded me of the process of going through the inquiry method with you that often the most beautifully simple and the most um, elegant, juicy details of our life are so simple and they just sit right in front of us. But sometimes we need somebody else to point them out.
Mhm. Yeah, and what I found is that we need somebody to hold us in that space. So,
Yeah.
the process of inquiry is just a meditation. It is it's just to familiarize. That's the definition of meditation, to familiarize oneself with itself. So, that's all it is, and my job as a facilitator is to help hold you in a moment long enough because over time we've built up all of these defense mechanisms and things that we do. We leave our body, we dissociate when things get uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's just for I am there to hold you in it, to see it clearly.
Rather than going away
Very
from
simple.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
It so when you think about how do we grow in any area of life, and think about like the weight room. I mean, I've spent almost a quarter of a century training, and now I coach people online. But it's the same concept of when you feel the sensations that you feel like you want to pull out of that exercise, you got to lean into it a little bit more, right? It's when
Mhm.
the burning is happening in the muscle that's where the true growth is going to happen.
Yep.
And leaning into the difficulty, leaning into this idea that, wow, this feels tough, that's where true growth is.
Mm.
But we want to run away from it at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had an experience recently where this was in a dating situation, and my story around men in relationships is that people leave.
Mm,
And he brought something up and he was having a discussion with me about things that he was questioning. And my natural instinct was to go into protective mode of myself, my
oh, interesting.
defense.
Yeah.
And I ran. And in hindsight, I just regretted it. Like I'm starting to build this awareness. And this is what inquiry does is it helps you build awareness around these patterns, these defense mechanisms, these things that we do that are they are subconscious. So until we bring them to the conscious, like we're just running on a pattern.
Mhm.
And in hindsight, I wish so badly. I don't know that the outcome would change, that we would still be together or not. But I regretted not being able to realize that I was like my little girl Robin in that moment was feeling triggered and feeling unsafe. And so I ran to protect her. And I never get the outcome I want when I do that.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have been able to have the awareness in the moment of that and sit with him in it and have an important conversation about what was going on for him,
Mm,
because that ended the result I got was not the result I wanted and not who I see myself as adult Robin to be. So that happened recently. And that is even with all of the work I've done, this 10, 11 years of work and endless facilitations I've had, we're all human. We're all learning. This is just constant growth throughout this lifetime. So, but that's what I'm really trying to bring awareness to is those moments, those really tender moments. It's like you have an opportunity here because now I have the awareness of my patterns and why I do it.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's simple, yes, and it takes a tremendous amount of awareness of living with intention, of moving slowly, of being like, "Ooh, I'm anxious. What's this about?"
Hmm.
Right? And moving throughout life that way. So as simple as it is, it also requires the want to do that.
Well, it's ongoing. And I think you bring up a really interesting point. I mean, because you're a speaker, you facilitate inquiry, you host retreats, you coach people. I mean, you all of these beautiful things, and you are growing. You are continuing to evolve. And I think you brought up a point that I want to make sure that we pause on for our listeners, because I think that in our society, especially in Western culture, we tend to think that there's some sort of arrival, right?
Mm,
We've arrived at success. Evolving is not, we evolve to a specific point, but we evolve to become a specific person. And we're constantly learning, we're constantly inquiring, we're constantly growing. And it's not a matter of, oh, I never have to deal with this again. I realized that little Robin needed to be protected in that moment. It, so you just learn some skills that allow you to come to a better awareness sooner, is the way I look at it. And I think it's a beautiful perspective, because
yeah.
I think far too many people trip themselves up thinking that somehow they're going to arrive at a certain point and life will become easy and I'll never have to deal with those things. But that's not reality.
Yeah, it's not. If you have a growth mindset, I mean, we can get complacent, but I think even if you decide, nope, I'm happy here, I want to stay here, life will throw something at you
Right.
because we are meant to evolve.
Mm.
It's this never ending discovery of self. That's
When-
how I see it.
So let's talk a little bit about the inquiry method. You brought up a recent episode where you paused and said, okay, this happened to me, and I had to go back through and I had to realize that this was a pattern because of a story that I was telling myself. There was a story that people leave, and so then I left. Um, it seems like every challenge that we're running into is based on us telling a story. At least that's my experience of it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's what inquiry does is it shows you who you become when you're believing a story, which is very often. So I've been researching this a little bit and this is a big span, but the human has 6,000 to 60,000 thoughts in a day. 75% of those are repetitive. 80% of them are negative.
Mm.
So, and I do a lot of Joe Dispenza work. I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Right.
but
Yeah.
he says that a belief is just a thought that you keep thinking. So our thoughts continue to become our beliefs, and most of them are not true. Also, I would like to look up the statistic on that. I think Joe Dispenza says that 60% of what we continue to retell also is we're retelling a past that never actually happened to
Right.
us.
Yeah. I think he talks about that in his book, Evolving Your Brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, um, man, where was I? I just got sidetracked.
We're
Or I
talking
lost
about
my train of thought.
yeah, we're talking about the stories that we
Yes,
tell
the
ourselves,
stories
and
we
it's really
tell.
the stories that
Yeah,
provide the pain.
right. So if we're believing those negative thoughts constantly and they actually become our beliefs will get in line, or our behaviors will get in line with our beliefs,
Yeah.
rather.
Yeah.
So we start to behave in a way as though our thoughts are actually true, and they're not. So that's what inquiry does. We identify a thought that brings you stress, and then we'll anchor you into a moment when you were believing that thought. And from there, we go into the whole process and I hold you there long enough to you can zoom out and see the situation clearly. And always you'll find who you became when you were believing that story, how you acted, how you treated people, how you treated yourself. And in that, you can learn your defense mechanisms, things like that, like what your
Mhm.
body actually does, what your brain's doing. Um, and then we have the opportunity to turn it around and say, who would you have been without that?
Mm.
And that can be a really profound part of the process too.
I think it was fascinating for me to go through the experience with you, because the thing that I chose was a moment where I noticed that my body shifted. I just didn't, I noticed that I started to feel some sensations of stress, and I had run into something. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. And through the process, you helped me to understand what the belief was that I was having in that moment. I had gone through doing a review of my financials for my business, and I looked at the number, and the number was, whether it was good or bad or whatever. I just started telling myself a story. And the story that I started telling myself was that, quote, it was taking too long to achieve the goal that I was going after. And I remember going through the questions with you, and you say, well, how did you feel in that moment? And you walked me through the feelings, the emotions, and how my body was showing up. And we dug deep on this for a while. And
Mhm.
I was just blown away. I didn't even realize. that the thought that I had of it was taking too long was the thing that caused me the pain in that moment. That was the story I told myself. I just thought it was me looking at numbers and saying, well, I didn't hit the goal that I wanted to hit, which was an extremely arbitrary, crazy goal that was just well beyond what I mean, it was just stupid, right?
Mhm.
it was, it's more of like it's a dream that I want to get to eventually. That thought, when we get to the belief, is essentially the pay dirt that we can start to dig a little bit deeper and start to build a foundation from.
Mhm.
Walk our listeners through, how do you, as a facilitator, get people to identify what the limiting thought or the stress causing thought is?
Do you mean the one that we start with or the
Yeah.
belief
Yeah.
that
The one we
we dig
start with.
to? Um, that just comes from a lot of conversation and getting people to just kind of open up to me and people just start talking. Some people come in knowing exactly what they want to work on,
Mm.
and some people are brand new and they have no idea how this process starts, which was, you and I talked for a long time before we got into it
Right.
and
Right.
identified a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So, and most of them that we end up working on they all have like an underlying fear.
Mm.
And so that's how I try to like go deeper. You can work on something that seems surface level because if it's coming up for you, it's ready to be healed and looked at and released.
Yeah.
So sometimes they seem surface and silly. Like one time I did one on my coworker. I felt like she was disrespecting me and I was like, this is really dumb. And the woman facilitating me was like, no, this is so good. Let's do it. And it went deep for me and my beliefs about women and how I'm not good enough and how they treat me
Oh,
and
interesting.
this and that.
Yeah.
So identifying it, I don't know that there's an art to it. It is just a lot of what I do also is energetically, I can feel like it hits something. I can see when it hits
Mm.
something in you.
Mm-hmm.
So if it feels surface, I'll usually try to say, like, well, what's the fear underneath that? Or something like that. But you can question anything. It doesn't have to be, I mean, and who says even like, what is the scale of deep or surface? I don't know.
Right.
Everybody's different,
Yeah.
you
That's a
know?
good point.
So yeah, we just identify something that causes you stress, like whether it's emotional stress or oh, I can't even think about that. I mean, there's a lot of different types of stress, but what you spoke to is then feeling it in your body. And if it's really stressing you out, you'll feel it in your body, but most people are very unaware of that. So that's a really profound part of the process too, is
S-
seeing what our thoughts do to our bodies. Cause physically, we are taking it all on and holding it and carrying it until we don't.
Yeah, we don't live in our bodies today. I'm a big
Mm,
believer that we have dissociated from our bodies so much. I mean,
yeah.
think about some of the statistics. Over 70% of Americans, it's estimated now, are obese. You
Which
don't
is
get to
crazy.
that level with being in tune with your body. There is no way you're shoving Wendy's and McDonald's down your gullet
Mhm.
and you're in tune with your body. It just doesn't happen. You dissociate. You don't sit there eating mindless bags of chips while
Right.
being in tune with your body. We dissociate because we don't dig in. Then that creates this perpetual pattern of
Mhm.
not living in our body.
Mhm.
I had a client not long ago because I'll ask questions of, hey, tell me how these exercisers are feeling. He goes, I don't know. I don't live in
Mm.
my body. This is all
Wow.
new for me. Like, I have no idea. You have so many different words to describe different feelings inside my body. I don't know. And we are, it seems like because we feel something and then we grab our phone and we go towards that digital
Yep.
device and we lose, focus, and we are prone to distraction constantly, we're not living in the body. For someone who comes to you who is not aware of their sensations, not aware
Mhm.
of their body,
Mhm.
how do you get them to get present so that they can become aware?
I keep asking. Like, honestly, a lot of people say, "What do
Give
you
me an
mean?
example.
What do you mean?
Okay.
Where do I feel that in my body?" And I tell them actually to close their eyes. I close my eyes a lot in that process because I'm very much like an experiential learner and I
Uh-huh.
have to connect that way, like feel it, do it. Um, but yeah, even closing your eyes can help. Okay, where do you feel that in your body? And they always can find it. It's just really unfamiliar for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find it's difficult for people to describe what they're feeling?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you help them with the language?
I try not to help too much because the one thing that I love about this process is the integrity of it, and it's for people to find their own truth.
Mm,
And a lot of the reason people can't describe it is because we just were never given those skills of feeling into our body and then actually not even just describing the body, but describing anything. We were taught to be quiet, get in line, this and that. Like many of us were not raised with parents that were talkers. I'm lucky. My mom was a talker, so I have no problem talking. Um, but that's not the case for most people. So I try not to push too hard. I want them to start building awareness around it, and mostly I want them to find it on their own. And they can. I don't
yeah.
feel like I've
Right.
ever just had to say, "Well, is it," and I would. If somebody just could not connect to it, I would say like, "Well, where do you feel that?" And in my heart. "Okay, what does it feel like in your heart?" And then when I ask those questions, people can usually find something. It feels heavy, it feels tight. "Oh, now I feel constriction in my throat."
Mm,
And mostly what we'll find is in these big beliefs, it's full nervous system shutdown
yeah.
for people, but they just have to sit with it long enough to feel it because like you said, we have so many distractions, so many ways to dissociate. And grabbing the bag of chips is one of them.
Hmm.
That's it's a dissociation, it's a distraction
Hmm.
from what's actually happening.
I've I'm curious to get your perspective on this because I've had several people when we talk about this concept is that I tell them I don't think you need to necessarily be able to describe every feeling that's going on in your body. That's why it's called a feeling. There's thoughts, there's sensations, there's feelings, there's emotions. Um, what I found is a lot of clients, when I ask them how they're feeling, they'll give me a binary, good or bad. I say that's not a feeling, that's a judgment. You're making a
Mm.
judgment
Mhm.
of what's going on.
Mhm.
Good is a judgment, bad is a judgment. It's
Right.
okay if you don't know how to describe the feeling, but can you feel something?
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
So are you talking about when they're like lifting weights, you're asking them how it feels in their body?
Now, oftentimes it's more of that we're dealing with an issue. So let's say I've got a client that has been struggling with, I just can't put the bag of chips down, or, I feel like I have to be super strict with my diet to get myself in great shape. And you're telling me that I can eat certain things. And the last nutritionist that I worked with or dietitian told me that that was horrible. So, well, how does that feel? Bad. Good. Okay. Well, but those aren't words to describe feelings. Those are judgments. So if I'm telling you that you can learn how to live to be healthy and still enjoy foods that you like,
Mhm.
um, how does that feel? Oh, it feels freeing. And so oftentimes it's just a matter of opening up the space to say, it's okay that you can't always describe,
Mhm.
but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about slowing down and allowing what will come to come. And I've been told whoever they is, say that these waves of intense emotion, they last 20 minutes. So whenever we feel like our
Right. Yeah.
emotions are so heightened that we're not going to be able to survive, rather than grabbing the cell phone, sit with it. And
Mhm.
like you said, labeling it good or bad isn't helpful. And I don't think that's true. I think it just is.
Mhm.
If you're feeling it, it wants to be felt and acknowledged, and it just is. So, does it
I
feel
like how you said
as
that.
good as feeling love? No, it doesn't feel as good and fun, but that is only because we've made these labels about what is good and bad. It is a human emotion, and they're all meant to be experienced, in my opinion. I think the more we suppress, the sicker we get.
Mhm.
So if you can't sit and feel it, it will come out in other ways eventually in your life, in your body, diseases, whatever it is. That's my belief on it, but I think it's true. I mean, we're making ourselves sick because we're not willing to look at ourselves.
Yeah, we become so limited in our bandwidth from a
Yeah.
sensation of feeling and emotion standpoint. I kind of joke it's like that we have the palate of like a 5 year old. I don't know about with your son, but when my little boy was younger, there was like maybe two choices, and one of those choices of what he would want to eat was uh, like every once in a while, and so pretty much all he ate was dino chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
That was it. That's all he wanted, right? Because that's what his palate was advanced to. And we
Mhm.
would say, okay, but try this, try that. I think as we have aged, we don't always expand our palates. We don't always expand the ability to taste the subtle nuance
Yeah.
of a flavor, of an emotion in a
Yeah.
way that we can, that brings this beautiful experience. It's either, is it salty or is it sweet? Yes, give it to me, right? Is
Mhm.
it good or is it bad? Am I happy? Am I sad? Well, there's so much more emotion that can be felt. I know that you had mentioned before when we were talking that this is an experience. This is something that is very fearful for men to jump into.
Mm.
Why?
Well, I think part of it is just because of the way that, our men are raised is to be tough, to be strong. You don't show emotion, you don't talk, you work hard and that's it. That's what your purpose here.
Very
So,
utilitarian.
yes, it's just over time conditioning.
Hmm.
And it's not always the case, but I have had a lot of men and actually a lot of my clientele is men. I think because this process is so straightforward. Yes, it can bring up emotion and yes, we're going to dig deep so it can be vulnerable, but it's also extremely straightforward and extremely helpful. It works. And men like that. They're like they want and I women too. I also am that way, but it's like they're problem solvers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they want to feel like their time isn't wasted. I'm not just going to cry on a couch or whatever.
Yeah.
Um but I also with that being said, I've had a lot of men reach out to me recently and say I really want to try this process with you, but I need to get a little more brave.
Mm.
So, I'm not sure exactly what that's all about, but I do think it is just that it's like we're all craving this connection. I think something is really happening right now where the pain is getting big enough that it's gonna force people to change and look and want to be different and be better. Um, but it's scary for them. If
Yeah,
it's
for
so
sure.
unfamiliar that it feels scary. And unfortunately is that a lot of us would rather live in an what is the saying? An unfamiliar hell. Wait, a familiar hell rather than the potential of an unfamiliar heaven.
Oh, I like that. That's a different take on the on that concept, but I really like that
Yeah,
you say
so it's
that.
like we just get comfortable. Even though it feels awful, it's more comfortable
Yeah.
than to step into something new and unknown. The unknown can be scary, but it is also the most beautiful place to live. It is where every possibility exists for you.
Yeah. God, that's
So,
a beautiful way to put it.
but we're so used to, even though it feels awful, we will stay there over and over. We'll choose the same relationship over and over. We'll refuse to look at ourselves over and over and change until we do.
Yeah.
I think people, for the most part, change when the pain just gets so big. Like the pain has to be bigger than the feeling, the fear of change.
Have you ever
But
been
why wait is the question.
right, right, because it's so much more freeing to work through it. Have you ever been paragliding?
No.
So years ago, I ran into a guy that he introduced me to the idea that this is something that I could do. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I started taking lessons. And paragliding is just this fascinating sport. I didn't know how big it was. And I actually had no idea that Utah, so right down here at the point of the mountain in Utah,
Yeah.
is one of the largest areas for paragliding in the entire world because of the consistency of the winds that come across there. So I started taking paragliding lessons. And I remember the first time that after we'd been through all the techniques and how do you do this, how do you pull on the wires or the strings so that you get the parachute to come up and then run towards the cliff. And then as you run towards the cliff, it doesn't matter if you're at the cliff, you just keep running. And so as he explains this to me, he goes, you're literally like, I want you to run in the air. And then once you're about 5, 10 feet away from the cliff and you're flying, then you get yourself into your saddle. You're locked in. You've got a harness.
Mhm.
The first time I did it, I started running and you just kind of you run like Napoleon Dynamite runs. You put your head down and your arms are behind you and you just run like Napoleon, which is great for a guy like me with curly hair. Um, and I yelled "Gosh, Tina" while I was doing that too. For anybody that remembers Napoleon Dynamite, so I'm running towards the edge of the cliff. I run and I keep running, and I realize that I'm pretty far out there. I'm flying at this point, but I'm
Wow.
still running. it was the most freeing feeling I've ever experienced in my life. And when you're paragliding, you feel. I got into it partially because I thought, oh, this would be kind of cool. I rock climb, snowboard. I do a lot of other things that are adventure based, and I thought this would be like a thrill and a rush. Nope, it
Oh,
was
it's not.
calming. It's like, have you ever flown in your dreams?
Yeah.
Floated? It's like
Mhm.
that.
Mm,
You just feel like you're hovering.
that's cool.
You're just it's calming. It's one of the most peaceful things I've ever done in my life. And I've always related since that time this idea of running towards the thing that you fear, but you've got the tools, you have the equipment, and you have the knowledge. And as soon as you get off of the ground, you just start floating, and it feels so beautiful. This
Mhm.
amazing experience. Can you talk a little bit about how, as you're facilitating people and
Mhm.
they run towards the fear, what happens?
It's beautiful to watch. There's generally a little bit of resistance initially, and once people overcome that, it is a I can usually see it and definitely feel it. It's so beautiful to watch that shift in somebody and have them get that like, "Oh," like and you could see it in their body, like everything shifts and
Yeah.
changes. It's
Yeah.
really beautiful to witness. It's so cool. It's the best part of my job is to witness that in people and to I know it's scary.
Hmm.
I know it's vulnerable to look at yourself. I know it feels uncomfortable to say the things out loud that you're thinking all the time, but nobody wants to say it. Like that kind of stuff can feel uncomfortable. So to watch somebody really go for it and dive into it, and then at the end to see the shift that happens it's pretty incredible. It's
Yeah.
such a gift
Eh,
for me.
But the resistance is important, right? I mean, you think about in strength training,
Mhm.
yoga, any type of resistance training that you're doing, it's resistance that gets you stronger.
Yeah.
You can't fly a paraglider or a airplane, a helicopter without resistance of the wind, right? The air, there has to be force in order to lift.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's an important thing to recognize, and that people, maybe listening to this who may be questioning, hey, should I get into this? I'm feeling some resistance. Well, if you're feeling resistance, then the answer is probably yes, right?
Yes. Yes, I mean, if you could start to look at it as a gift, it's a little notifier to you. Like I've started to look at my anxiety rather than resent it as like, "Ooh,
Mhm.
what are you telling me right now?" Right? Like our bodies are smart. And so if you have resistance to it, it's something that can be overcome. And I can speak so I teach yoga also.
Mhm.
I've been teaching for 7.5 years now, but I initially did a different style of training than I teach now. I ended up what in something that felt more comfortable than what felt really vulnerable and so now it's been almost 9 years. I just went back and I'm now going to start teaching the classes that I set out to do because I'm finally done work through inquiry around my fears and how I've allowed fear to hold me back my entire life.
Interesting.
But where I'm going with that is the resistance that I felt around it got so dark and heavy that it's like, if you don't start to look at those things, they don't just go away.
Yeah.
At least for me, I don't know. Maybe they do, or maybe you distract yourself so much that you think it goes away. And some things evolve. Like maybe I didn't need to go back and do that, but I did because I had so much resistance, so much procrastination around it that it was like once I did it, I didn't need to do the checkbox that I just recently did, but it meant something to me to like complete this checkbox of this process for me. But more, it was like the letting go of that resistance. I felt like 100 pounds had been lifted off me that I've been carrying for 8 years and convincing myself it's fine, it's not the right time, this or that,
Yeah.
distracting myself,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, I think if you do feel that resistance, it's something to look at for sure because there's a reason you feel it.
Yeah, and I think it takes me back to something that Byron Katie talks about when she talks about this idea of loving what is. Like what
Mhm.
is it's truth. Whatever the truth is that's inside of you,
Uh-huh.
that's what you go towards, right? And I guess my question with this is, how does somebody know if what they're going towards is quote the right thing?
How do they know? I hmm. Well, I think that you have to start in one direction. I just heard Jay Shetty say something yesterday that was like, stop fixating on the right decision and move in the right direction,
Mm,
and the right decisions come. So I would say that that would be the first step, and then you'll soon get in alignment. As far as finding your truth though, that can be tricky because we convince ourselves through our stories, our behaviors, our conditioning that this is the truth.
mm,
And that's what this process dissects is when you know your truth, you know it. I can't tell you what your truth is because I can't physically feel that for you, but you know when you're back in alignment of your truth. So how do you find it? I think you have to do the work. You find processes. Inquiry is not the only one, and there are probably several different versions of inquiry. It is it's the one that I found that's the best to find my truth that never fails,
mm.
ever.
Our
So,
society has become such a blame society, though. We want to, being a victim is celebrated today.
yeah.
We're not a society that says dig deep, question your beliefs, figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and understand yourself and take full accountability for how you feel and how you're showing up to life.
Mhm.
This process that you work people through is it's the spark. It is the true definition of taking accountability.
Yeah.
How do we get started with that? Because I believe it is something that we need in our society. We've become such a blame and a victim society that we've got to go towards more personal accountability. How can someone get started?
With taking accountability,
Yeah.
well, for one, there has to be a desire, right? The awareness that you're not, because I think that's the problem is that most people don't even have that awareness. It's such a conditioning that that's just the way that they function and live.
Mm,
So it starts with a desire and awareness to say, hey, I don't love the things that are showing up in my life. What can I do about it to change it? And from there, you start looking at yourself.
hmm
And, yoga's one if you want to do it through movement, inquiry's one. So there's a lot. Um, But that is my probably my number one favorite. I say that about so many parts of this process because 'cause they're all profound and they all show something that we're not accustomed to, in my opinion. But the accountability piece is, for me, the biggest because I want to be accountable for everything that comes into my life. And if I'm not, I've gotten to the point where if somebody treats me poorly, I go out and I'm like, "What did you do, Robin, to attract that person in to treat you that way? Like, what do you need to
Oh,
look at
interesting.
right now?"
Yeah.
That's the space I function from because I don't wanna give up my life to somebody else. I don't want to live on default and be reliant on somebody else to feel good or what everybody else is doing, right? So it's just I think it starts with the desire and the awareness and then work, keep going. And I'm not perfect. I still get into that mentality, right? It's like we've said, it is an ongoing evolution, and I see it as like we're just peeling back layers. It's like layers of an onion. Oh,
hmm
there's another thin layer. Oh, wow, that goes deeper. So,
How
yeah.
do we find enjoyment in that process? Because I think, like we referenced before, sometimes we feel like that there's going to be a point where we arrive. And from my experience, that's not really what growth and evolution is about. We do reach different levels. We
Mhm.
level up, we improve, we peel the onion layers back. How can people find enjoyment in that process?
How can they? Man, I do think it is finding this like loving what is, right? You create a kind relationship with reality, and that's what she's talking about is reality is kind. Even if I don't agree with what you're doing, if I can accept it, it's kind. It's my stories and my judgments about what you're doing that cause my own suffering. So it's just starting to cultivate a kind relationship with reality and acceptance and I think it's just looking at yourself over and over. It has nothing to do with what you're doing. It has everything to do with me and my feelings about it. And that's bringing something up in me because there's something unaddressed from probably my childhood that I haven't looked at, that I'm unaware of. So how do you make it fun? I am really trying to change my belief that like growth and healing has to be hard because I think that is out there. So there I see both sides of the spectrum. It can get dark and hard because facing yourself sometimes it's not pretty. sometimes it is admitting, like, I've had to do I stayed in a relationship a lot longer than I should have, and I've had to do some, like, really looking at that and forgiving myself of that, and why did I do that? And, wow, I let my fears really hold me back, and that's been hard to accept for me. So there is those like, that facing of yourself of what you find, but it's also so freeing on the other side. And so it can be hard and dark, and it's also freeing, and it doesn't have to be hard and dark. I think it is all just perspective,
Yeah.
which can shift day to day with your mood also.
I so I've taken a perspective over the years that I think that if we dig in and start to do some of this work, more often than not, and I can't speak for others, so I can just speak for myself. More often than not, when I look at the challenges that I've been dealing with and I work through something mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I start to laugh because it's like I wow, look at what the dumb thing was that I did.
Mhm.
And it's helped me to take my probably demented, probably weird, strange sense of sarcastic sense of humor and deepen it even more because there's so much of this that I feel like we take ourselves way too seriously.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's also like I have to do the work around it to actually get there because we all have the ability also. So the other side of doing it the hard, dark, like treacherous way
Yeah.
is to spiritually bypass things, which is like everything is love and light and just let go and these concepts that are beautiful
Hmm.
and true. But if you don't have a way to actually do the work to get that alignment within your body, then it's just fluff and you're not really changing.
Right.
So there's both sides to it for sure, but I agree with you. Once you do the work to see it, you're like, "Oh my god. Like I can't even believe that that's where I was functioning from."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fascinating to see and it can be funny. And
Well, I remember sitting there as we were doing the inquiry. I just started laughing a few times because when I
yeah,
realized what I was telling myself and what I was believing, how that caused my stress, I just started laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're taking
yeah,
this way too serious. None of this really matters.
yeah,
Nothing is that important to cause you to stress out about it. And it was literally you getting in your own way. And
yeah,
that was hilarious.
yeah. It
How,
is hilarious. And
how
has that stuck
absolutely.
for you? You haven't had that repeating thought come back, right?
Oh no,
Yeah, so
no.
that's when you know that you've done the work around it
Yeah.
because you actually are in alignment with, yeah, that's not me. I get it now.
Well, so I will say this. So the funny thing is the thought has come back up a couple of times,
Mhm.
but not the belief.
Right, like the stress around it is
Yes.
gone.
The stress is gone
Yes.
because when the thought comes up, I literally just smile. We talked about this, like
Mhm.
that, the side smile, the sarcastic, I call it my sarcastic asshole smile. I
Yes.
get that smile and I'm like, yeah, no. I hear the thought. It's dumb.
Yeah.
But it's like any other dumb belief that I used to have that I don't believe anymore. I
Yeah.
just laugh at it. I think it's funny,
Yeah.
but it doesn't cause me stress. It actually makes it humorous in life. It creates this lightness. So I think as we're talking about this idea of like that growth doesn't have to be dark. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be that challenging. We don't have to make it that way. I mean, life's tough enough as it is, right? With the stories that we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
But going through this process of inquiry and growth, that doesn't have to be super dark either. Doesn't have to be hard.
No, it certainly doesn't have to be.
No.
And
We
things might come up that feel hard, but the other side of it is so much freedom.
How can somebody start to put their current challenges into perspective?
Well, I think a simple way is actually the 4 questions of Byron Katie's that she talks about in her book is if you start to question when you start feeling stressed or like a stressful thought comes up, question it. And her 4 questions are so simple is that true? And 9 times out of 10, you're probably gonna say no. So the second question is, are you with a shadow of a doubt? Like, do you know that is true?
Mhm.
Right? So you're
Just
questioning that again.
100% certain.
Yes. And then it's who are you when you believe that thought, which brings again full accountability. Like, how am I functioning when I believe that thought? And then who would you be without that thought? And that's super profound because it's like, oh, I actually would have just walked away.
Mhm. Pretty.
and accepted it, right? So it brings it full circle. So that's a really simple way to start. Yeah. And you can certainly go deeper with it. The process I facilitate will take you way deeper than that, you know?
Yeah, your process. Well, it's not just four questions. There's a lot of depth to it. There's an art. There's a science to it.
Mhm.
But I think you also asked me the question as we were going through and exploring mine of who were you? How did you show up? What type of person were you when you believed that belief? And that was a question I hadn't asked myself. And that was one of those aha moments where it's just like this click in my mind. And all of a sudden, I could see myself on one side of who I was in that moment. That was the complete antithesis of the vision that I have for myself of how I want to live. That this calm, confident, going through life just in my most authentic way, self over here on the left, was not who I was in the moment where I believed that thought.
Mhm.
And when I believed that thought, I became the tight, restricted, frustrated, um, trying to figure it out, got to work my tail off to make this happen person. Opposite of who I wanted to be. And as soon as I recognized that, it was mind blowing. It just opened me up in totally different ways. So I think that's one of the most powerful questions that I experienced was, who are you when you believe that thought?
Yeah. Yeah, I ask you to look at yourself. We look at a few things within the stressful thought or the situation. And then, yeah, the last one is looking at yourself. Like, how do you see yourself in that moment when you're believing that? And it is always crazy what comes up for people. I mean, we are judging ourselves. Several thoughts are coming up all the time that we don't even acknowledge
Mm.
and how we feel. And it's like, I feel small. I feel weak. I feel these things that we don't realize that this is coming up for us, but it is in a moment when we're believing our stories. Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on this quote. So, Dr. Joe Dispenza said that it's never about the object, relationship, healing, or manifestation, but about who you become in the process of creating it. Tell me how that resonates with you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes of his. I think that we get really excited about manifestation and creation, and I am excited about it too, yet we get so fixated on the thing. And what he's saying there is it is not about what you're reaching for, but it is about who you become and who you have to become to be the person that you believe is worthy of having that.
Yeah.
So it's getting your energy, your actions, your intentions, a way of life. Like, I have a good example personally right now. It's easy. I'm starting a new job and I haven't been working like an office job for a while. So I've had a very free schedule. So for me, in trying to manifest this perfect job that I want to come into my life, I thought I better like, how would this person that's going to have this job behave? And that those actions are waking up early to get my meditations in, waking up early enough to work out. It's like we shouldn't be waiting for the job to come to start behaving in such a way that we're in alignment, that we are that person. It's becoming that person before the manifestation comes. And then you're energetically aligned with what you want.
Mm. I love that.
So it's about who you become. Like we can't have all of these big manifestations and expect that we're not going to change, that we're going to be the exact same person. If
I
you're reaching
Yeah.
higher than for something higher than what you have to match it.
Yeah, you have to become something different. It reminds me of a conversation I had recently with a friend. He was actually a former guest on the show, Tanner Guzzi. Tanner teaches uh, men. He coaches them on their style and how to express themselves through the way that they show up. And we were talking about this idea of just dressing for what's authentic to you, showing up and being the type of person, living the type of life that you want to live, not to put on some sort of show or some sort of front. You could take two people and put them in a suit and put them side by side. And the person who authentically feels comfortable in that suit because it's just aligned with who they are, you'll notice a difference in their resonance. The person who has to wear the suit because they are going to a wedding or going to church or going to something else, it's the same thing. The
Mhm.
mechanism is the same, but the authentic expression is totally different.
Mhm.
And I've been asked from time to time, and I'm wearing a sport coat today. Well, I'll go out to the grocery store. What are you dressed up for? Like, I'm dressed for life. Like this is just this is who I am. This is what I enjoy doing. This is I dress and I show up for life the way that I want to. Um, and it's been a beautiful thing because the way that I show up, I've been able to meet some amazing people. A lot of people walk up to me and just start conversations out of the blue because of how I'm showing up. Or when I reach out to people, I'm able to have conversations like this because of living a way that I want to live. If someone is away from that alignment of self and they're feeling some sort of movement in a certain direction, what advice would you give them?
Movement in a different direction from self?
To become their ultimate self, to become their more evolved self.
Mm, yeah, I would say do what makes you feel good
Because,
because that is what's calling you. Like, that's your authentically, like, what feels good to you.
mm,
And I would tell them, to start getting clear about what you want. I think you're a fan of Atomic Habits, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
one of my favorite
James
books
Clear.
too. And my favorite thing he says is that people don't lack motivation, they lack clarity. And I found
That's
that to
right.
be so profound. Obviously, I'm a fan of clarity. This is what this process that I'm so passionate about does is it finds your own clarity, your own truth. But start getting clear about what you want. What kind of a life do you want to live? How do you want to feel in your life?
Mm,
What is success to you? We need to start redefining success because so many of us are successful and we're unhappy, right? Like, what is a dream relationship to you?
mm,
So start defining that stuff and then make steps to live as though you have that now. I think that in relationship, especially being out in the dating world right now is so scary. And well, I don't think it's scary, but that's all you hear about is how awful it is and this and that. And it's like everyone is matching everyone's energy. And it's like, no wonder we're in this cluster of it's gross.
mhm,
And so I'm like more like, no, why don't you define who you want? Like, who is this ideal partner that you want? And start showing up as that.
mm.
And that is how you're going to bring in what you want. So the first step I would say is clarity. Most of us have no idea what we want.
And we're just going off of what society tells us, right? I mean, we're constantly stuck on a screen. We're looking at something else and we're saying, "Oh, they have that, I should have that too," right?
Mhm.
And we're shooting ourselves to death. We're shooting on ourselves all the time. I should have this, I should have that. And I think a lot of people really are just chasing the same thing. It's likes, it's
Yeah.
comments, it's do I feel validated because someone else viewed my profile or whatever it is, right? But
Yeah.
we're chasing a lot of the same stuff and we're chasing things that society by and large is telling us that we should chase rather than getting clarity on what truly matters to us.
And what feels good. It's like we want this life that looks a certain way. And then once you have that, you're like, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So we start buying more. We start doing whatever to try to find that fulfillment. And it's within. So I love all the things too. I love the beautiful homes and the beautiful cars. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But does it feel good? Are these things fulfilling to you?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a lot, I think, about getting more in touch with like, how does this feel to me?
I want to talk a little bit about how it feels and going towards the things that we love and the things that do feel good for us. I was talking to a friend one day who was transitioning from a very high demand religion that for much of his life he felt like he was supposed to subjugate his feelings for the demands of the religion. That you're not supposed to feel good. You're supposed to constantly serve other people, and you're supposed to put others before yourself, and you are supposed to list out all these different things. And he said, I feel guilty just sitting and relaxing. I feel guilty just enjoying a cup of tea. I feel guilty buying something for myself. I feel guilty doing anything for myself. Now, I'm not sure that we live in a total society that feels guilty about doing things for themselves because I do tend to think we live in a somewhat of a selfish perspective. How do people balance out going towards the things that feel good, but not creating a life that is a life of ease and comfort where there's no growth?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I would not encourage anybody to into guilt. It's one of the lowest frequency feelings that we can feel. I would say if you feel guilt around something that you, it would be wise to look at that. Um, because
Why do
again,
people feel guilty? Where does that come from?
it's old conditioning, old beliefs. They've probably been told that their whole life. I would guess that he was raised that way. You know, or was in a long, profound relationship, like something that was significant that created that belief over time.
Hmm.
We get that. And it is interesting because some people feel no guilt at all. And then other people, you know, that's
Sure.
a pretty extreme case. And I think that it would be wise for him to look at the things that make him feel guilty, that really are taking care of himself. Because that's an old belief probably that he learned that, you know, something is wrong with you or you're selfish if you take care of yourself.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
When you talk about guilt being a low frequency, talk a little bit more about that. What do you mean?
Well, there's an emotional scale, like David Hawkins, I think, came up with it or he talks about it. I read his book Letting Go through my facilitation school. And I don't know them all super well. I don't know that I could speak very intelligently to it, but I know that guilt and shame, I think, are the two lowest frequencies, like emotional feelings on the frequency scale. And to go to the other end of it, I've recently been seeing things that I always thought that love was the highest. And now you're seeing these things out there that authenticity is higher than love, which I think is I've been thinking about it a lot, like really profound. I mean, and I do think when we are our most authentic, we are love.
Mhm.
And, you know, because if you're in alignment and you're in your most authentic space, functioning from that space with integrity, it is pure love.
Yeah, you're just authentic to who you are, which
Mhm.
means, yeah, that's an interesting thought. I wonder if it is just pure love,
Yeah.
acceptance,
Yeah.
maybe.
And that would also speak to why you authentically want to dress nice for life and people pick
Right.
up on that. They're not coming up to you because your blazer is nice. It is very nice and lovely. They are coming up to you because you are in the authentic vibe and people are attracted to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's
interesting.
that inexplainable, you know, quality that people possess. When people live authentically, it is extremely attractive.
See, I like that. The word quality. Quality is something that I've explored God, for many years now. Have you read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
Mm-mm.
You will love it. So Robert Pershing wrote this book, and guy, I want to say it was back in the 70s. And it's part biopic, so it's part him telling his story. He had a mental breakdown and a psychotic break. And then at that time, they were doing shock therapy. And so he went through the process of going through shock therapy, which we don't do anymore. And so he tells a story from a really fascinating perspective
Wow.
of the two people that lived inside of him. But he tells it in this journey that he and his son and a couple of his friends took across country from Minnesota to I believe California or somewhere on the West Coast, and what that experience was like, and how he eventually got to a point where he understood both sides of himself. And so I love the book because it tells a journey, it tells a story, but it also is this really fascinating um, uh, study, I guess you could say, on quality. What is quality? And there's one moment in the book that I found particularly fascinating. So his friend was having an issue with his BMW bike. And Robert Pershing was, I can't remember what type of motorcycle he was riding, but it wasn't a very expensive bike. And he said, "Hey, let me fix that." And so he says, "It looks like you just need a little shim in here." So he takes a can of Coke or Pepsi and he cuts the can up, folds the aluminum over, sticks it in, turns the bike on. The bike works fine. His friend was so upset that this scrap, this thing from a can, was put in to fix his very expensive BMW bike.
Mhm.
And so part of what he does in the book is he explores this idea of what is quality? How do we define it in life? And I've gone deep in this subject, probably more deep than I should, because I've listened to that book a dozen times. But quality is something that fascinates me. Quality to me is enduring. Quality is something where it's like oftentimes I'll throw on a white t-shirt that I got from Uniqlo that cost me like $9,
Mhm,
right? But then I go get in a car that is not a $9 car.
mhm,
And the juxtaposition between those two things, they're both very quality things. They're just totally different. I throw on some cowboy boots that I bought 20 years ago that the quality of them is the patina and the fact that they're beat up and that they look just gnarly, but
mhm.
they fit perfect, right? I'm curious what when you talk about living a quality life, you talk about showing up with quality, showing up with authenticity. How would you define it?
A quality life, um, I want real. I don't I want real people in my life. Quality, I deeply value connection, um, deep conversations, understanding. I like to I hope that I make people feel or I hope that people leave me feeling seen and heard and understood.
Mm.
Um, I can't do that for them though, but
Sure.
yeah, what is a quality life? Yeah, it's an interesting question because like I said, I do value the nice cars, this or that.
Mhm.
And it also doesn't define me,
Right.
And so quality I think is having a kind relationship with life and the flows of life. Because I mean, I have a beautiful life and my life has also been heartbreaking the last year.
Mm.
And I think holding the space, like quality to me is having the space for all of it. Because like we said, it is an evolution and we can't control what comes in and out, but like how deeply rooted am I in myself that I can handle these waves? That's quality to me.
It's a beautiful way to
I
put
don't
it.
know that I'm even answering your question.
No, I
I
think you're
could
doing a great job.
yeah, I would have to think about that more. I think also, yeah, I want time with the people I love. Like I want connection. That matters a lot to me. So, and I don't even want to say simple, but kind of.
There's
Yeah,
a
I have some
simplicity to
evaluating to do and then maybe some aligning to do with it too.
it.
You
I
know?
like how you're starting to facilitate the process of yourself right
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Oh, always, always. Yeah.
So quality is fascinating to me. It's to me it's something that's built to last. But I like how you talked about that. You've got a quality life and it's been tough,
Yeah.
and probably been tough off and on here and there, right? But when you think about a great story, great stories, great movies, great anything, they all have this beautiful quality to them when there's the struggle, right? The classic hero's journey,
Yeah.
where there's the struggle that has to be overcome. There's the guide that comes in to help out. There's um, the self doubt of the hero, whether it's a Luke Skywalker, can I become a Jedi, or whatever the story is that we get involved in. There's the struggle, and that's part of what makes quality, in my mind, is it's the struggle. And that doesn't mean that we can't have the beautiful things in life, and that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy luxurious moments. But I don't know about you, but I've never read a book or I've never watched a movie where everything really like just went perfect. And I was like, yeah, that was awesome. Right. You
Yeah.
want to feel that juxtaposition.
Yeah.
I've never met a person that was just happy all the time where I was like, I want to spend time with that person because I, it doesn't make sense, right? I want to be around people that
Yeah.
have depth. I want to be around people that have meaning. And I think that it's the challenge, it's the patina, it's the fact. I always come back to this idea of built to last, right? The reason
Mhm.
I wear the watch I wear is not because of the brand, but because it's built to last. The watch I wear is the watch that can be passed to my son when
Mhm.
I'm dead, and that he will be able to pass to his son when he's dead, and it will still work. It's built to last. It's bigger than me. It will outlast me. It will be something that is will go far beyond. It'll carry memory with it. To me, that's quality, right? Something
Yeah.
that's built to last. Not easy,
No.
not always
Yeah.
flowery.
No, and I mean it is a similar thing, but with humans we're just much more complex than a watch. And what
Right.
makes us built to last is being able to overcome and it's this overcoming process over and over and that's what's so beautiful about the movies or people that you want to have those conversations with. It's so admirable and beautiful to see somebody overcome themselves
Mm,
because we as humans can see that in one another pretty easily. I can. I mean, I can look at almost anybody and see so much beauty in them.
mm,
Do I give myself that same grace?
mm.
No. But watching somebody do that too and find that in themselves is is incredible.
Yeah.
That's what we want. That is what is building them to last, to weather the storms,
Yeah.
to keep growing, to build that confidence, to know that they can change.
I love
Yeah.
that. You bring up a really interesting point I want to get your perspective on. So, this idea of giving ourselves some love, giving ourselves some grace, and seeing the beauty in ourselves. Um, I think that there's a lot to that. We don't do enough of it from my perspective. And I know I
Mhm.
don't. I, for years, like, oh, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm getting older. My hair is thinning. It's not the same thick, big afro that I had back when I was younger. The hairline is receding. And so here I am. I'm telling myself these stories where I make myself feel bad. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm watching old movies and I see Paul Newman or I see, even just recently, Jude Law, where it's like, here are these great looking guys. And Jude Law's hair goes way back further than mine does. The peninsula is much deeper than mine is. And Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and these guys, they all ran in the same things I did. And I don't look at them and say, oh, but their hairline is receded. I see the beauty and the character of what they created in their life and
Yeah.
who they were. And it for some reason one day it just hit me as I'm watching this Paul Newman movie, and one of my all-time favorites, and I pause and I just step back and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I just need to pause and think about this story that I'm telling myself, that it really doesn't matter. Yes, I don't have the same hair I had when I was 20 years old, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's maybe not the same thickness, but does it really matter? Or does it bring more character? Does it bring more interest? Does it make me different? How do we pause? How do we take the time to recognize certain things about ourselves that might be beautiful in someone else's eyes, but we're just not seeing them in ourselves?
Hmm. That is a hard one too. You're asking me some really good questions. Um, again, it is all gonna start with awareness, right? You know, the awareness of like, I deserve this too. I deserve to give myself the same love and the same grace that I would give to anybody else.
Yeah.
And that can be uncomfortable. I mean, I'm for sure a work in progress there too. We're all our own worst critics, right? You
Mhm.
know, um, I don't know.
It's tough, isn't it?
It is. I think it's just a practice like anything else, you know, having the awareness and then finding things in ourselves that we're grateful for. Like maybe to, you know, I don't know if the positive affirmations work or I haven't gotten too far into that, but it is about at the end of the day, it's like it is a deep belief. So
Yeah.
again, it's addressing these beliefs. Like I've done inquiry on myself around like my body image
Mm,
that I've struggled with my whole life,
mm.
you know, and it's still an ongoing process, but being able to look at it and see where those things come from can help you address that. And then once you have that awareness, you can start to shift your behaviors around it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
I,
think there's a lot of practices that can help cultivate more self-love. I don't know that they actually get down to the beliefs though and where it came from.
Yeah, I wonder that too. And that's one of the things I love about what you do with people, because you dig into the inquiry, or you would dig in through the inquiry to the belief. You
Mhm.
know, I've used affirmations before. I've actually tried to use them with clients. I find them to be wildly unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Um, except at a certain point. And it's not really that at that point it becomes an affirmation. It's of like I'm trying to believe something. It's literally they get to a certain point. I'm like, okay, now just pause, look at this, and let's reaffirm that this is where you're at.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like going and standing on a mountain, right? In Utah, one of my favorite mountains is Mount Olympus because of the majestic nature of how it overlooks the Salt Lake Valley. And when you get to the top of Mount Olympus, you just turn and you look over this way and you're seeing nothing but trees. And then you look over this way and you see nothing but this beautiful valley with a ton of houses and buildings. And When you're up there, you can observe, right?
Mhm.
And when you're standing on that pinnacle, you can then reaffirm, I am at the top of the mountain,
Mhm.
right? The top of that mountain. So that affirmation, when you're there, I think has resonance. If I sit here in studio and I say, I am at the top of the mountain, that's stupid. There's too much cognitive dissonance there. The brain just says, no, you're not, dummy.
Yeah.
I am a mountain climber. No, you're sitting in a studio, right? So I think that that's where it becomes wildly unsuccessful. One of the things that I've worked with clients on that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on is I believe that there's a process of learning to love ourselves where we pause, right? We have to pause and observe. So it all starts with observation. And we're just saying, okay, what is good about me? And it's not about making something up. It's just looking and saying, okay, well, what is good? Okay, well, I have this, right? So once we observe, then we can start to appreciate.
Mhm.
But appreciation takes a little bit of time. And then after we've appreciated for a period of time, then we can go into love. I've kind of thought that the self help world has had it backwards, and we're just going straight to love. I'm like, well, that's just like walking up to somebody that you meet in the grocery store, and you're like, hey, you want to get married?
Yeah.
That's weird, right? We got to develop a relationship. We have to observe and say, what is it that's great about me? And then we just write those things out, or we pause, or observe them. And then
Mhm.
over time, we can start to appreciate it. Oh, I am really good at this thing. And then over time, we can love that thing about ourselves. Tell me your thoughts.
I think it is a practice. Again, awareness and like, yeah, what do I love about myself? I can name a few things that I love about myself that are not physical.
Mhm.
And when I get down to it, the truth of the matter is I oftentimes when I don't love myself, quote unquote, or I physically am judging myself, I'm looking for love outside of me.
Mm, interesting.
And so if I can get back in alignment with, no, I love myself and I know that I have a lot to offer. And the person that falls in love with me is going to see past my whatever, my
Mm,
thinning hair, right?
yeah.
Because that's not why I want somebody to love me anyway.
Right. Right.
So I think there's, some getting to know of that and getting to know yourself. Like, what are my qualities? And then you can fall back in love with yourself.
Hmm.
And some of it can be training and repetition. Like James Clear in his book again talks about the guy that you become what you want to be. And it's not just about telling yourself that you are somewhere where you're not. He told his client to go into the gym for if it was only 5 minutes
5 minutes.
every
Yeah.
single day.
Love that.
And from that place, that guy could say, I am somebody who exercises every day.
Mm.
Right. And so this might be off the topic of self love, but again, it's practicing something. So repetition and really like looking at that constantly. And then I would also say, start giving it away. What do you wanna find in yourself? Give it to other people because it always comes back. That is just the way
It's a
that, like,
great
energy is
perspective.
reciprocal. So, yeah, if you want more love in your life or self-love, like, start giving that away because those emotions and those habits are naturally going to come back to you if you can start seeing that everywhere you go.
Well, the world becomes a mirror to us, right?
Yes.
Because then other people can reflect back some of the things that are beautiful in us, and we can start to see it from their perspective.
Mhm.
You brought up an interesting point that I know Byron Katie talks about in her book, that oftentimes we're looking outside of ourselves for some sort of love, affirmation, or acceptance,
Mhm.
when what we really need in that particular moment is love, affirmation, or acceptance from ourselves. Um, Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, she talks a lot about creating I already said this, but a kind relationship with reality. And so I think that the reason that we feel uncomfortable with what is going on is because there is something inside of ourselves that's not comfortable with it from childhood. So starting to, and it might not be childhood again, but most of them do go that deep.
Yeah.
So starting to create a relationship with that of knowing that no matter what's going on outside of me, I'm okay. But that takes awareness and addressing, well, what part of me is getting activated by this?
Mm.
Right? So, because when you're clear, like I said, I can say, oh, I don't like this physically about me and no one's ever going to love me, or I have this situation in my life. Who's going to take that on? And it's like, no, when I'm in alignment, the right person is going to come to me and love me for all of that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know that. So, yeah, I think we need to start. stop looking outside of ourselves and start validating those things within ourselves and just becoming getting more and more in alignment, in attunement, and living it that way. Joe Dispenza also has, I was going to say, if you want to start practicing it, he has some beautiful walking meditations where you practice walking as it for an hour and a half. And it's you're walking as that person and you take on the energy of that person that you want to be. So you could use that with self love. How would a person who loves themselves walk and approach the world?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Walking meditation is one of my favorite things. I've studied meditation in many different forms from great teachers over the years.
Yeah.
The one I always go back to is just walking meditation. It's
Mhm.
I love walking.
Mhm.
What can I do while I'm walking? Well, I can spend some time doing some sort of meditation. So I
Yeah.
use a variety of methods when I do it, but I found that to be so effective for me. I mean, I learned meditation from one of my early teachers after while she was teaching me Tai Chi and how to do standing meditation, standing there in a horse stance position. I've learned Zen meditation from one of the founders of the Zen Center, multiple meditations from multiple great teachers, and walking meditation tends to be the thing I come back to.
Yeah.
I want to come back to my experience with you because I that just keeps coming back to my mind.
Yeah.
You mentioned before how some of these things are rooted in childhood.
Yes.
So I want to share my experience. Um, when we, my belief that I think we eventually got to was that I was believing that certain goals that I had set for myself were, quote, taking too long. That's the
Mhm.
story that I was telling myself. And so that story created this sensation. It created the buildup. It had all the stress to it, right? And then you walked me through this process of inquiring more, discovering more. How do I feel? How do I want to show up? Or how am I showing up when I believe that? One of the questions that you asked is I can't remember how you framed it. So I'm going to ask you to it's something about childhood. Do
Mhm.
you recall how you asked me the question?
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought this up because this is one of the most profound parts of the process. It's where we
It
can start
blew
to
my mind.
identify, yeah, we start to identify our loops and patterns that we're behaving in,
Yeah.
where we're acting out as 40, 50-year-old adults,
Mhm.
our 5-year-old child self.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Mine
and
went back to, I think, 8 or 9 years old,
yeah,
is what I found.
yeah. So, and you might have one deeper, but that was a whatever comes up is perfect,
Yeah.
right? So the way that we ask it is I ask the same thing. I don't remember exactly what your stressful thought was, but it was probably like success is taking too long. It was
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Something along
Something
those
like
lines.
that.
Yep.
And so it was, go back to your childhood, like as far as back as you can go, the first time you remember believing the thought,
Hmm.
success is taking too long and it was causing you stress.
Hmm.
And it might not always be that exact verbiage because you're a child, right? And it might feel a little different. And you were able to connect to that pretty profoundly with the experience you had with your siblings and working for your parents. And
Yeah, it was really fascinating. So when you asked me that question, I immediately was transported in time. I was in the back seat of a little Honda Accord, like a 1970s Honda Accord, driving from our house to my dad's office building. And my dad owned a construction company, and they had this massive building where all the people that managed the construction they worked, and then in the back was all of the machining where they would do the HVAC and all of the other stuff. So my second oldest brother, my sister, and I had jobs cleaning the office building. And I think I was 8 or 9 years old around that time. So we would go out there, and I was the youngest. I think I'm 6 years, about 6.5 years younger than my brother, and 3 years younger than my sister. And so we get out there, and I had one job, and that was to go around the entire building and empty the garbage cans. So being younger, being smaller, uh, not realizing it at the time, but having like massive ADHD. I
hmm
know that now as an adult, and now I can look back and like, wow, no wonder I was always so distracted. Um, I I would get berated verbally, and sometimes not just verbally. Sometimes it was like the looks,
hmm
like there's my brother was really good at throwing the looks and really good at the silent treatment, and then really good at getting mad at me. Um, and so it just that I learned that hard work is the only way that you achieve something in a certain time, and that if it's not happening fast enough, then there's going to be something negative on the other end.
Mhm.
I didn't even know that was still alive in me,
Yeah.
and that that was manifesting itself in
Mhm.
the way that it was.
Yeah. And so we were able to identify that as a child,
Yeah.
you found that belief and then who you became or what you decided that that meant about you. And that is the loop. That is the place where we behave from. So every time that comes up for you, you still as I don't know how old you are, 25.
Thank you very much. Yes.
As a 25-year-old man, still behave
Yeah.
in that way because you so every time we identify with something, we make a neural our brain makes a neural pathway to that.
Yeah. We call it a neural loop, right?
Yes. So whether it's a piece of pizza or this is what love and connection means,
Yep.
we have
Yep.
created these neural pathways
Yep.
from adolescence. And so until we do something to change that neural pathway or bring awareness to it, we continue
Hmm.
to do it because that is how we identify with it. So even again, like I said in the beginning, even if it's so uncomfortable and unproductive for what we want in life, we do it because it's familiar. We don't know another way. We're
Yeah.
actually extremely unaware of it. So, um, yeah, that's the neural pathway right there. So now that you know that, you have the opportunity to make a different choice and change your relationship with the thought or the belief this isn't happening enough, fast enough.
Yeah. Well, it was a beautiful moment. I to recognize a few things, and it was highly unexpected. Number one, that that was still alive in me, but then number two, when you started walking me through questions of how do I, how did those moments shape me? How did I feel? There were many things that I believe were very positive, very beneficial that
Mhm.
came from that. The first one was that not knowing that I had ADHD at the time, I could get lost in my mind and I would have no idea how long I had been doing something. And so that brought me back to a sense of awareness to where it gave me the gift of becoming more aware. If it weren't for my brother getting frustrated with me, getting angry with me, I would have had no negative repercussion and I would have just stayed in my own head forever. And so it gave me the sense of in social situations, I needed to have more awareness. What a beautiful gift that was.
Mhm.
It also gave me the idea that being aware of other people's thoughts and feelings and emotions is an important thing, not just getting lost in my own. And so sitting in that and feeling the frustration, feeling the anger, feeling all of these things helped me to develop a sense of empathy that I don't think I would have had
Yeah.
otherwise. Now, the negative loop was that I would tell myself, and I did up until we met and talked about this, and I don't know if I'll do this in the future or not, that something is taking too long. And then as soon as it's taking too long, then I get derailed, I get sidetracked, I'm now emotionally hijacked. I don't
Mhm.
and I make it take longer because of that. So
Yeah.
while there was this negative loop, there were also these beautiful, positive uh, learnings that I had never connected. And what a great gift that was to go
Yeah.
through that negative experience that honestly I never really thought about. In fact, I thought about it afterwards and I still got to call him up and tell him thanks. But what a great gift it was to go through that and have him give me a hard time. Because honestly, I think that's somewhat what brothers should do, right? You
Mhm.
got to give each other a hard time. You got to keep each other honest. My kids do that to each other all the time, where they're like, "Come on, dummy, do this," and that helps to put these parameters of, societal and relational norms. That was a great gift, and it was so shocking of the beauty that came from that.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for facilitating. It was
Yeah.
amazing to go
Mhm.
through and to see both how it negatively affected me, but then also how it positively impacted me.
Yeah. Well,
How
again, let's not label negative and positive.
Thank you.
It
Yes,
just is. And now
it
you have the
is.
opportunity to shift that into something that rather than negative or positive, I would say that's more in alignment with who you are.
Mm,
Because also
Good
And I
correction.
share also
Yes.
what you found is, I mean, yes, you're successful, you're business driven, that,
Yeah.
but you're also a creator. You're very creative.
Right. Right.
And you also found that you stifle your creativity, your depth, your
Yes.
um openness,
Mhm.
that your flow.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mechanical mind takes over too much
Yeah.
rather than the creative mind in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like how you said that. I'm glad you caught me on that because I do continually say good or bad, even though it like grinds on me, right?
Yeah.
When I hear that from other people, but I still do it myself, and I think that's why it grinds on me.
Yeah.
Is I
Well, I was
haven't
teasing you. We all do it.
right, but I like
But
that.
whoever's listening in us now, we will probably be a little bit more aware of that
Yeah, they're going
now.
to be driving in the car listening to this and like I do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the what are some of the beautiful moments or the beautiful learnings that you've had on your path of inquiry?
Oh my gosh. I don't even it has honestly changed my life. It has changed who I am, how I view things, how I show up. Um my ability to like keep coming back and keep working rather than just shutting down and shoving aside.
Mhm.
Um I, my level of awareness I think has vastly shifted. Um
Awareness of.
everything, of other people, of myself, of judgments, of stories, all of it, so much awareness of everything. Um, yeah, but specifically, I mean, I've had some extremely deep inquiries that have changed me, and I've questioned big topics like connection
Mm.
and these big concepts really that like and having a process that can help us even define what that means for us.
Yeah.
Like I did inquiry with somebody and we questioned trust in his inquiry, and he really was struggling with trust, and what he found was that he had no idea what trust meant for him.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. What a
I
fascinating.
think I told you that. I
Yeah.
probably use that example because it was really profound to it was just like, wow, we do have these big concepts and these expectations of the world around us and for our lives, and we don't even know what that means for us. Like, would we even know if we had it?
Mhm.
So that's why I speak to clarity a lot, is like getting clear on what you want and allowing that to change too. Question that. Keep questioning everything. So that's been one of my biggest takeaways is I question everything.
How do you know through the questioning that you've reached a point where you understand and that you have that clarity? I guess is my first question. And the second one that I'm going to bolt onto it would be when does that change?
Um, I know because it's a physical knowing. Like I said, like I can't tell you your truth or make you feel your truth, but you feel your truth. And I can usually see that energetic shift in you and feel it too.
Mhm.
Um, but I know that I've found my truth because I'm back in alignment and I can reapproach any situation. And it doesn't mean that the outcome's any different. It might still be, or it might be an outcome that isn't like the easiest. Like maybe I need to leave a relationship because I found something that I can't unsee now.
Mhm.
So it doesn't mean that it makes everything like the easiest, but if we live in alignment and we're okay with that and we stop labeling good or bad, everything would be easy.
Mm.
And and if we just accept reality as it is, I mean, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that because there are logistics, like financial logistics and things like that, that like
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
want to say, oh, everything's easy if you're authentic, but life would get substantially easier for everybody
Yeah.
if they lived in alignment with what is true for them. We create our own suffering because we're not in alignment and we don't know our truth. So, how do I know my truth is I can feel it. And I've never done an inquiry where I haven't felt at least had like some energy shift on something and that I don't have a different way of approaching it
How do we
or
know when
the
that
way that I
clarity?
see it, like my perspective changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. And then how do we know when the perspective changes that we've got better clarity?
Well, I think that if it keeps coming up, that maybe it is changing. Maybe it's time to look at it again.
And the reason I ask that is partially because I think that learning, growth, evolution, we tend to seek a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
And I don't know if you're like me, but I get confused from time to time. I'll read something and I'm like, oh, was that the direction? Oh, well, what about? And I've got so many thoughts and so many ideas that are marinating inside of my head. And I think I've got some clarity. And then I pause and I step back and say, no, no, that wasn't it. That was just an idea,
Yeah.
but it's not the direction I need to go in. But that feeling of confusion sometimes feels like a false clarity. It's like climbing a mountain and you think you're getting to the top, and then you realize it's a false summit, and
Mhm.
then you've got another one, and then that's a false summit, and eventually you get to the summit. But you, as you're going up the hill, you see all of these false summits along the way. So I'm curious how we define or how we delineate between false summits of clarity and true clarity.
I think you probably have to try it out. I mean, we won't at least for me, I'm very much like an experiential learner.
Mm,
Um, I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but I learned that about myself. Like I was put here to experience things.
interesting.
So if
Okay.
you tell me not to touch the hot stove, I'm going to touch it anyway because I have to learn for myself. And then the other side of that is that I was put here to help share my experience with people.
Hmm,
So I don't know if it's true. It just told me that, but I am I learn through experience and I think we all do. So, but some of us can learn through somebody else's experience, but
sure.
try it out. Again, it goes back to like, is it really that serious or are we just making life so serious?
Yeah.
Try it out. And if it, and then check in with yourself. Does this feel good and right? Nope. I'm kind of doing that in my life right now where I'm trying something totally new where I've never been and I'm just seeing how it feels.
Mm,
And am I capable of this? Because this might bring, it's bringing out a new, different, like fun side of my personality that I'm trying to tap into. So it's like, try it out. I, yeah.
I like that.
Um, and I do think confusion can be really valuable too. I think confusion is asking you to look at something. When we get so stuck, I sat with a spiritual mentor and he was talking about this. He's like, I like to keep people a little confused and happy. Because if they're confused, they're not in this black or white, I know this, I know that.
Yeah.
There is space in confusion for options, for possibilities. So confusion can be a gift, and it's just I see it as the opportunity to get curious.
It's a great point. I can't remember the authors' names, but they wrote the book Peak Performance, and they talk a little bit about how a little apprehension is the way that all peak performers live their lives.
Mhm,
That's how they perform at the highest level, whether it's in art, science, sports, business, life, that some apprehension, which, confusion is apprehension because we don't always know the way to go,
mhm.
is part of what taps into our ability to choose from the options so that we can
Yes.
move forward in the best way possible.
Yeah. So if you're confused and you get curious, you get to make a choice there rather than society told me this or that, or this is how I did it last time. It must be the same way. So that's, I think, the gift in confusion if you use it at that rather than letting it stifle you for so long or turn it into resistance or, oh, I'm confused. This must not be right, which might be the case. It might not be time to move forward until you get clear, but it is an opportunity for you to get clear and to look at it. And that might be a different clarity than you had a week ago because everything is changing all the time, whether we want it or not. That is the one consistent in life that everyone around you is changing, everything is changing. You are changing, your cells are constantly regenerating. So it is always the opportunity to just look at it from maybe find a different perspective and maybe it's the same.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It takes confusion and puts it into a different paradigm or different perspective. It makes me think of a couple of thoughts I've had over the last several years. One related to depression, and another one related to just uh, life in general and
Mhm.
how things just don't matter. So I'll come back to the depression one in just a second. But there's the reality is, let's say, so I'm 47 right now. Let's say that, I live another 40, 50, 60 years, and then I die. So then the question is, okay, when I die, what happens? Well, there might be a few people at that point that will be a little bit sad. The reality is, if I die 50, 60 years from now, there will be a few people who might be a little bit sad, but they may also feel very relieved because if I'm 90, 100 years old, I know I'm telling myself that I'm going to go out in a ball of flames doing all kinds of crazy stuff because I'm going to stay healthy and fit my whole life. But all things being equal, there's probably people that will say, well, it's good that he passed away because he, had this or he had that or whatever, right? Then you fast forward and you think, okay, well, 6 months after I die, what happens? Well, at that point, all my possessions that I had have been passed on, sold, or thrown away. And memory is the only thing that remains with a few people. 99.9999% of the world will never know that I even existed on this plane of Earth. 50 years from now, or 50 years from my death, there might be one or two people that will know that I existed. 100 years later, no one will know. But yet, I get so serious about making really small decisions. And oh my gosh, what would that person think about what I did here? And it doesn't matter. It really, truly doesn't matter because 100 years from now, no one's even going to know that I was around. So who the hell cares? It doesn't matter. And so I live based on what I feel like is going to be most authentic to me in that particular moment. And in doing that,
Good.
I feel a lot happier.
Yeah.
But so I want to get your thoughts on that. But it, I apologize for the long-winded uh, presentation of the question here. Depression is something that I think is a fascinating concept. We talk about depression and anxiety a lot in our society, and it I think is more prevalent, but it's also more talked about as well. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing because I think when we're in a state of depression, when we are depressed, that means that things are slower. We tend to look at things in a more thoughtful way. We tend to look at perspectives and we question some of the things that are going on in life. And I think, like you talked about with confusion, there's beauty in confusion because we have options. When we feel a state of depression, we are not go, go, go. We're actually having to pause and look at life. And our nervous system is depressing down certain things and forcing us to slow down to get a different perspective. I'm curious to get your thoughts on taking ourselves too serious. And then when we get into different states, different feelings, different sensations, how do we start to lean into those rather than move away from them?
Mhm. Well, I'm not a doctor.
Sure.
And I can speak, I mean, from personal experience. I haven't suffered from like awful depression, but I have suffered from anxiety, definitely anxiety and depression my whole life.
Mm,
So, what has worked for me over time is when I feel that, I mean, I do allow it. I allow myself a day to, if I need to lay in bed all day, then do it. And I will say the more work that I've been doing, I haven't had that come on for a long time. I do get a lot of anxiety though. And like I told you before, I've been looking at my anxiety as a gift, like as a messenger, because it is telling me something,
mm,
you know? And so that's my opportunity to really look at that as like, what is this? Is it warning me of something? There's something to be looked at.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, what was the question exactly?
So really, how do we think? I mean, two-part question. One is, how do we not take things so seriously with putting it into the perspective that at some point nobody's going to even know we existed? And then the second one is with depression and or confusion, any of these things that we may have in the past labeled as negative.
Mhm.
How do we just sit in them and appreciate them for what they are?
Yeah, I think as far as, I'm not there yet where I live in a space of nobody's going to remember anyway, because I do think that that is a little bit could be potentially, I'm not labeling you anyway, but there could be some bypassing going on in that.
Hmm.
It's like, yes, I can intellectualize that all day long. Like I can say, I know that what you think of me is more about you than it is about me. And I believe that, but if I just bypass every time that comes up and triggers something in me and I don't do the work to actually see where that
Yeah.
came from,
Agreed.
then I'm bypassing it.
Agreed.
So that gets tricky, like,
It could be
it
weaponized in that way. Yeah,
yes.
I agree
So
100%.
it's both,
Mhm.
which is hard to say. It is annoying. I guess is annoying is not hard. It's an annoying answer to say it's both and find the balance, blah, blah, but it's true. It's like, yes, on one hand, don't take it so seriously, but if something continues to come up for you, then do the work around it so that you can see that you've taken it too seriously.
Mm.
I'm a super serious person. So I might not be the best person to ask about this. And I have done work around that. And I do want to be more playful and fun and in the moment and not so reserved and restricted. So I have done work around that of like, where did I lose that? Where did I lose that childlike wonder within myself?
Yeah.
Because when it comes out, it's amazing.
Mhm.
When I'm free, my friends are like, you are the funniest person to hang out with.
That's great.
But it's not always at all, and so they're always like, "Is Fun Robyn coming out tonight?" And it's interesting to just look at. I don't know, but, yeah, I think it's both for sure on that. Like, I wouldn't wanna bypass everything and just say, "It's not gonna matter at the end of the day," because you're living now.
Right.
Why we don't wanna live when we're dead. You're living for your life right now.
Yeah.
So I would say it's both. Find the joy and the silliness in it of like, man, that thought's ridiculous. And if it keeps coming up and that's not enough for you to resolve it, then do the work around it.
How do we live in those states, whether it's anxiety, depression? Um, how do we live in those states and then start to move through to a sense of inquiry?
Yeah, so I would say allow it. Again, it's not good or bad. It just is. And again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to whether somebody has like a hormonal imbalance and that's what's causing it.
Sure.
That is a whole other topic that I won't go into, right? About the depression that we have these days and what we're putting into our bodies and what is causing that.
Hmm.
Um, but so again, not labeling it, allowing it to be what it is. And if I had a child with depression or if I was extremely depressed, I would seek a process like this to start looking at it of what is this telling me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
because it can be a chemical imbalance, and then it also can just be something that is screaming for you to look at.
Yeah.
I look at that with physical ailments too. I believe that everything that comes out physically is something emotionally expressing it.
Yeah. I can't disagree with you there. I think everything is chemical, right? I mean, when we think about chemistry internally, the chemistry that we put in our body with our food or our water, or there's a chemistry to all of it.
Mhm.
But I wonder how often we just go quickly to the chemistry of a pill to fix something rather than the chemistry that's already inside of your brain to address it, right? The brain
Too
creates
often.
the chemicals,
Yeah.
right? The brain is the head of the central nervous system, which controls everything, right?
Mhm.
Our hormonal responses, everything that happens within the body is happening in there. And I don't mean to minimize things like anxiety or depression. By any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
I also think that for many years we've just pushed them aside because they were unseen. You can, if somebody breaks their leg, you can see it. If somebody has cancer, you can see that on their white blood cell counter. You can see some of these other things. Whereas anxiety, depression, some of these other mental health challenges, you can't always see them. And so I
Yeah.
think they get pushed away, minimized, or I don't know that they're demonized as much anymore, but they were for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I think we need to address them appropriately. Um, I'm curious, and I'm probably making a bit of an assumption here, uh, but it seems like we're on the same page that the best way that we help our kids is to do the work ourselves.
Mhm.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree. And I also think that our kids are their own humans that have come here with their own callings, their own intentions, and their own lessons to learn in life. So it's funny. Somebody told me a story, and well, I won't even go into all of it, but at the end of it, I was like, it's almost like no matter what we do, if we show up how it seems like somebody would think is perfect,
Mhm.
or if we don't show up at all or we're abusive, it's like no matter what we do, we're almost like messing our kids up,
Oh, yeah, for
you
sure.
know? And so
I've told
it
my
is
kids that. I'm
interesting.
like, "Just call me. I'll help pay for the bill." Like, when you go to counseling afterwards, like, I'm sure I'm screwing you up, so there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to laugh at it. I'm a mom and
Yeah, no,
it
I'm
is
laughing at
very
it because I know I'm
serious.
I'm screwing my kids up in one way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but to answer your question, yes, the only way to make a change to help people, to help anybody in this world, is to help ourselves. We cannot change other people. And I do believe, as far as taking it back to parenting, it's like I just want to model something for him that he will hopefully grasp onto when it's time for him. Like my son is super resistant to meditation.
Mm,
He's like, "That's weird, da da da," and but his dad's starting to meditate more so, and he'll listen with me at night. And I just think like my mom modeled spirituality to me really well when I was young. And I went through a phase where I thought it was weird because
mhm,
that's what people told me. And lo and behold, that was ingrained in me. And now it's like I am my mom. It's
mm.
crazy. And I never thought I would say that, but like I am like a younger version of her. And so I can see where how what we model to our kids, ultimately, hopefully they come back to that, those practices, those, the knowings.
Yeah.
So the wisdom. So that is my hope with my son, is that I continue to strive to be better. And he inspires me to do that. Absolutely. Like he keeps me going. He keeps me wanting to be a better person. And I'm
That's
doing that
fascinating
for
how
me, but
that
also
happens.
I hope that at the end of the day, after, when he gets old enough to dive into some of his stuff, and I'll probably start trying to facilitate inquiry on him, I don't know, sometime soon. But when they're so resistant, it's also not productive.
Yeah.
It makes it worse in
You
some
got
cases,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that is kind of the only way. Like we want to be guides for them. And they are also, especially my son, has the strongest personality. He is relentless.
Mm.
And he could argue, I mean, the kid should be an attorney. He can argue for anything and come up with like really good points. And he's clever. And so it's like, I just I can't tell him what to do all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I try. And yes, I have to be the disciplinary and all of that. But I know very well, like, he is going to be his own person. He is larger than life. So yeah, my hope is that he will eventually come back to, when he struggles through life, come back to these things that I've taught him over time and that I've modeled to him over time.
It's almost like that to me, as I look at my kids and the stage of life that they're at right now and watching them over the years. The best gift that I think I can give them is just to help to equip them with tools and
Yeah.
resources so that as they deal with challenges of life, they have what it takes to hit those things head on. Each one of them is different. They all came out different.
Yeah. They come who they are.
they're not, yeah. Yes, we shape certain aspects,
Mhm.
but they're all so different. I
Yeah.
mean, my son, you're talking about the dedication that your son has, the determination, the push. My son's the same way. When he gets something in his mind, he's gonna do it,
Mhm.
and it doesn't matter what gets in his way. He's just gonna figure it out. Recently, a joke because he retired from corporate life. A few months ago, at 18 years old, he decided he was done with the corporate life. He was working for a Home Depot, and he said, I just don't want to work for a corporation anymore. And so if I make X amount of money doing my own business, I'm going to quit. So he did. And then his business has grown significantly. And so here's this 18-year-old kid that has a couch flipping business. He buys and sells Xboxes. He is doing affiliate market. Like he's doing a half a dozen things at any given point in time. And he's making more money doing that than he would have made an entire year of working at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Um, I think that if, as parents, we can model these things, then we just help them to have some things that are some tools in their tool belt, but they also inspire us significantly.
Hmm.
We were on the ski lift the other day And it was just he and I on one of the lifts, and we were talking, and he was mapping out his business plan. And I just looked at him and thought, who are you? What in this is amazing. What do you, so this is your plan. He's got this whole 3 to 5 year plan. He's like, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this.
Wow.
And he's got this whole thing mapped out. And there's no doubt in my mind that some iteration of that will happen because he just has decided that's what he wants to do.
Mm.
I don't know where he got that from, but it's amazing to see. And it
Yeah.
inspires me. I literally sat down when I got home and I thought, oh, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I take this beautiful gift that my son gave me from his example and then create more clarity on where I want to go? What a
Yeah.
beautiful thing we get from our kids, right?
Yeah. I read a book, The Prophet. Have you read that? He talks about
Yeah.
children and
Khalil
how,
Gibran.
yeah,
Yeah.
they are not ours. They just come through us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're teachers to us, probably more than we are to them.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard that from my parents, but I think that's just because I taught them a lot of patience
Mhm.
more than anything. I think I was the one that probably tried and tested them more than anybody else. So I think I've heard that before. What's making you most proud in your life right now?
Hmm. I've been going through a heavy transition. I left a long-term relationship, moved out of the house, like moved my son, all of that. I've been creating a couple new businesses and, just really coming home to myself. And it's interesting. I'm 43. I just turned 43 in December and I'm in a place that I never ever thought I would be. And um I'm proud of that. As hard as it's been too to look at myself and be like, "Oh, like I'm starting over. Like what am I doing? I thought I would be better in this, this avenue of my life or whatever." It's like I'm proud that I am rebuilding it and I'm so proud of the spiritual work that I've done. I dove hard in post divorce about 10 years ago. I wasn't happy and I
Mm.
didn't know I wasn't happy. I made some really regrettable, hurtful decisions and I wanted to look at myself. I knew that there was more. I just was like, this can't be it. And so that question of like, there's more has led me on this path of yoga, meditation, all of these different modalities that have helped me see more and more of myself and who I have been and then who I want to be. So, what am I most proud of is me sticking into this process of becoming and continually taking accountability and becoming a better version of myself, a stronger version, a more authentic version, a more loving version. Um, I love that about myself. I think that is the one thing that I could say that I love about myself is my commitment to growth and to change and to becoming better is what I'm yeah. And I've made some decisions recently that I'm proud they weren't the easy decisions.
Mm.
It was like, well, I live a beautiful life. I could just accept this, but again, I wasn't fulfilled and so making that decision of I'm going to have to start over and like financially this might be a stretch or this or that or I've got logistics to figure out. I'm leaving this cushy life to hopefully ultimately become more happy and a bigger version of myself. Like that's not the easy choice to make.
Mm.
So, but it is the right choice for me. It was the right choice. So, and to sit in that discomfort of the unknown and trust that life always takes care of me. The unknown is a scary place or can be, but like I said, it is where the possibilities exist. So, and it's led me this whole being willing to step into the unknown and this what is scary in that for me has led me into some beautiful places. And now I feel like I finally in facilitating inquiry, it's like I finally found that thing that I've been seeking that's going to allow me to work with people and allow them a process to change and find their truth.
Mm.
And I don't do it for them. Like they do their own work. But yeah, so through all of this discovery, I feel like I'm becoming more and more whole. I don't know if you ever get to that place. Like we said, it's not a destination, it always comes. But being willing to continually look at myself is probably one of the things I'm most proud for or proud of.
If you're to go back and give yourself advice 10 years ago, what would it be?
Oh man, 10 years ago, I don't know. I would just say stick with it. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes throughout that too. Like stop fighting would be what because I was heavily in a really rough divorce.
Mm,
It was volatile and a lot of time and money, energy wasted staying engaged with one another.
mm,
And I think I would have given myself the advice to like find acceptance and find peace and like choose like what do you want now? Do you want peace or do you want to fight? It's like sometimes we just have to give up the war like for to find what we want. Like let it go. So that would have been a big thing because I carried with that with me for a long time. Yeah. And my ex-husband and I are best friends now, but it took us a long time to get there.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Robyn, what do you feel like you know that you wish others knew?
I I wish people could see the possibilities of, of what's out there. Um, I think that's one of my gifts too, is like being able to see possibility for people that's outside of this black and white, tunnel that we live in. Um, like I said, I can see so much beauty and so much potential in everybody. And I know because I have these processes that I know work, it's like I know that that's available to them too. So that's what I wish that they knew is that peace and alignment is available, happiness is available to you too. And I also wish that they had the awareness that that gets them to that place. It's like I said, I wasn't even aware that I wasn't happy.
Mm,
And I needed to do what I did to discover that. So I wish people had more awareness just for themselves. I don't say that in a like, oh, I wish you were aware. It's like if I could give you something, it would be like all of this awareness and that possibilities exist outside of what you know right now.
beautiful.
Yeah.
What was the darkest day of your life and what was the brightest?
The darkest day, I don't know, man, was there a day? I would say that period of going through divorce was so treacherous. I couldn't even narrow it down to a day. Um, it was so hard because so much of it was self-inflicted, and yet I was so not ready to be done with my marriage, and I was very much in love with my life, but had made decisions that didn't just show that. And so that was so hard and dark, and then what happened after that and dealing with all of that was just that was for sure my dark night of the soul, and that's when I found, like, there has to be more, there has to be something on the other side of this, and so that's when I really started seeking, and unfortunately, that's what most of us wait for,
Mm,
is to get that low to, like, ignite a change in us. So, yeah, as far as a day, I'm sorry, I don't know an exact day. The brightest day of my life, I mean, should I say when my son was born? I don't
he may feel good about it. I don't know.
I loved that period of my life. I loved being married and, like, creating something, like, with somebody.
Mm,
That was such a beautiful period of life.
mm,
Narrowing it down to a day is really hard,
yeah.
but I'm going to think about that after because that's kinda cool.
What scares you right now?
Mm. I mean, I think I said this earlier, I've lived a life where everything has scared me. Um, do you know what scares me is keeping myself stuck.
Mm,
And I am in this place, like I kinda said, I'm dancing with these different ideas and whatever, but there feels like some stuckness in it. It's like I know I need to do something, but I'm not doing it. And so that's what scares me the most is staying stuck because if I stay stuck, I know that these things that I want, these businesses that I'm building, just like you found, you stifle your energy when you stay stuck.
yeah.
And I'm way too aware to pretend like I don't know.
You can't put your head in the sand now.
I can't. And so staying stuck and not being brave enough to let the situations go, let the people go that I need to, or anything that takes my energy in a direction other than what supports what I want in life, that scares me. Yeah.
As you've evolved in life, what do you no longer believe that you used to?
Um, You have like really good questions. What do I no longer believe? Well, I told you I've changed my belief that like healing has to be so dark and hard. Um yeah, I that is my answer again is going to be something of the opposite because it's more of a feeling. It's like how stifled I was and black and white I've lived that like I don't believe that anymore. So it's more of like this overall feeling as I approach tough subjects is the answer is that I now see possibility that I never saw.
Mm.
So I guess that yeah, that like nothing has to be black and white and that nothing stays the same.
That there's possibility in it all.
Yeah, and that there's like a guarantee in anything, there's not. I don't believe that anymore.
You had a quote that you oh, I don't know what I did with my phone. I must have left it out somewhere else. I thought I had it with me, and I left it in the other room. Anyway, you had a quote by Bianca Sparangino. I don't even know how to say her name,
I don't know how to say it either.
but you put it up on Instagram, and I thought it was a beautiful quote. I was going to bring it out and say I want you to read it.
Oh shoot.
But why did that quote resonate with you so much?
Was it the one about showing like being proud of how you show up?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was she's such a beautiful writer and it was going pretty deep into like at the end of the day I just want to be proud of how I showed up.
yeah,
And that resonates so deeply with me with this work I do. It's um I love coming back to when I feel hard and really stuck without bypassing and and not doing the work around it. I constantly think about like what how would love approach this?
mm,
And I I always want to leave people clear with me. I I want to show up in a way that was loving and that was kind. And it's not about being nice, but it's that that is my authentic all of us. It is love is our natural state. It is
yeah.
the way that we came into this world and the way that we'll leave. And so at the end of the day, I really just want to be proud of the way that I showed up. And there's so many times that I don't show up the way that I want to. And so if I don't and I'm aware of that, I want to say that to that person
Mm.
and let them know that because there's a lot of healing that can even happen in admitting that, and breaking down those walls with people and with ourselves and in doing that, I think you also lay the ground to do it different next time. So yeah, that matters a lot to me. I mean, I think about which is kind of morbid, but I did a the Keller Williams like real estate training one time and they have you write your eulogy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And doing that was really it was actually a powerful process because it gets me thinking like, what would people say about me when I go? Because I can be abrasive. I'm super straightforward. Like I can have a little bite to me if I'm not careful. And I don't mean it that way. It just is the way it comes across. Um, but I hope that at the end of the day, people say like Robin was always loving and kind and real and honest and not afraid to like tell people that.
I think being proud of how you show up leans into this idea that you're clear on your values.
Yeah.
You live in a way that's authentic and integrous with who you are, right?
Yeah.
Not someone else's, not somebody else's idea of what you should or should not be, but
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yeah, and there's 2 sides to it too. It's like, I don't wanna just be a pushover and loving and kind. I think kind and nice are different?
Yeah.
But so there is the other side of like, I want to be proud too that I held my boundaries, and when somebody didn't feel right to me, I was okay to let them go too.
Yeah.
So there's 2 sides to like just what you said, it's integrity,
Yeah.
really.
Kind is not being walked on.
Yeah.
I remember a story. Had a gentleman that worked for me, and he was when I took over that part of the business, it became very clear that he probably wasn't the right person for that job. Um, the person that had been his manager previously had let him get by with a lot of things, and he was a great guy. And we had a conversation one day, and I said, I've got to be honest with you. This is probably one of the toughest conversations I've ever had because of how much I love you and how much of a great guy I think you are. I just question whether or not you're in the right role. And I don't know, based on how, what you have, what you're bringing to the table, if this is going to be something that you're going to be happy in long term, especially given the standards that need to be here. And he told me later that that was one of the most kind and authentic conversations he had ever had. He said
Mhm.
it hurt for a moment, but it got me to realize I haven't been happy in this job for a really long time. And then he did find a job and that he was extremely happy in. And he came back to me several years later and, thanked me for having that conversation. I then had something recently where I had an old colleague reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm starting a new business. Can I get your perspective on it?" I said, "Sure." So we jump on a call and he said, "Do you mind if I conference in my new business partner?" Sure. New business partner comes in. He introduces me to his new business partner. He says, "Now I want to tell you about Steve. Steve is the only person in that entire company of 20 some thousand people that ever shot me straight and told me exactly what he thought was going on. And it was the best thing for me. And it helped me to grow better than anyone else. It was the most kind thing that had ever
Yes.
happened." I believe being kind is not being walked over. Now, I think the delivery of our messages, the directness of it, can
Mhm.
also be couched with a concern for the other person, but just saying everything is okay doesn't do it.
Right.
I think through this process of inquiry and through
Mhm.
this process of looking deeper and through this process of finding out what is alive in a person, what are the loops that they keep coming back to? How did they break through? How did they evolve and not just feel a little bit better with some sort of outside resource is one of the most powerful things that people can do. So I know you speak to groups, you facilitate inquiry on a person by person basis. Um, how do people get in touch with you so that they can learn more from you and get the information that they need to move forward?
Yeah, if people are interested, and even if it's just more questions to see if it might be a right fit for them, I can go more in depth to the process. Um, they can email me. My email is ROBYNCPINTO, so Robin C. Pinto at gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram is ROBBIEC.H, and they could message me there. So either one of those would work. And then we can like set up a call if they want to do that or just schedule a one on one session.
And you facilitate both in person, but you also facilitate over Zoom as well, right?
I do. And
Yeah.
both work really well. I've been surprised at how well the Zoom works.
Mm.
I prefer in person. You prefer, some
Yeah.
people are just in person people. But it actually is just as effective, pretty much. Yeah.
That's great.
Hmm.
I will have links to all of those to your email and to your Instagram on there so that if people
Yeah.
want to learn more, they want to get in touch with you. Inquiry is the method. The person, the guest today is Robyn Hawkins, and what a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, your life, and a little bit of your story with our listeners today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, I think that this is something that it hopefully will be one of many that we can do
Yeah.
because I'm excited to have our listeners hear this, make some change, and there's so much more that we can dig into in the future. So, Robyn, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode of The Evolved Man. If you're learning from and gaining value from this podcast, please subscribe to the Evolved Man newsletter, where I can support you even more in your personal evolution. I want to help you reverse engineer your success. The Evolved Man newsletter is like getting a free coaching session to keep you moving forward on your path of personal success. Go to theevolvedmanpodcast.com to sign up today. If you found value in this episode, you can give us up to a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify and share it with your network. That's the best way to support the podcast so we can continue to get great guests and provide you with the best wisdom for your daily life. Until next time, keep evolving.